Hey guys, Heroic Flamingo here, bringing you my Guild Wars 2 leveling build series, which will feature a video for each of the 9 classes. The reason I'm doing this series is because the vast majority of build videos online seem to be solely focused on endgame meta builds, and I know from my engagement with the Guild Wars community that a lot of you out there want help with some of the more basic elements, so this one is for you guys. In these videos, I'll be going through all of the information you need to make sure your character is as powerful as possible all the way from level 1 to 80. I'll be covering the best weapon types to use for your class, as well as armor stats, runes, utility skills, and specializations. If you've not yet made up your mind which class you want to play, check out the class guide playlist on my channel, where I have a detailed guide on each of the classes to help you make that decision. I'd like to thank you all for your fantastic support I've received on my channel so far, and if you find this content useful, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to be kept up to date on my latest content. You can also follow me on Twitter at Heroic Flamingo, where I'll be posting regular updates as well as doing gem giveaways for you guys. Finally, I just wanted to let you guys know that there are 2 links in the video description that might interest you. The first one is to sign up for a free Guild Wars 2 account, so if you haven't got an account yet, do give that a click. And the second one is a link to the Guild Wars 2 store page, where you can purchase the Path of Fire expansion and get Heart of Thorns with it for no additional cost. All of these things help support the channel and I thoroughly appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so now it's time to look at the leveling build for the Revenant. And the first thing we're going to have a look at are the weapons that we've chosen for this build, and then we'll have a look at the individual weapon skills to see how they fit in. So, first up, we've got the dual sword, so main hand sword and offhand sword. So with this build, this is a complete must, and pretty much with any base Revenant, if you're going to be playing a power build, which most leveling builds are, you're going to want to go with the dual swords. The Revenant overall is quite restricted with the weapons it can choose at base game. I mean, the axe and the mace are both more suited to a condition build, so they wouldn't fit into this. The hammer is an option for a second weapon, I'll go through that in a minute, but as a main damage dealing weapon, you're going to have to go with the dual swords. It's not even close, to be fair, so definitely that's what you want for your first weapon set. And then for my second weapon set, I've gone with the staff, and I know that probably seems like a bit of a strange combination, but you're going to be spending most of your time with these weapons here, and the staff is simply for crowd control and healing if you need it. It's more of a defensive weapon from that standpoint. The other option is you could have a hammer here if you need some range damage, because funny enough the hammer is actually a ranged weapon for the Revenant. So if you really do need some of that, then potentially you could put a hammer here, but you know, I think this is good. It's good for keeping you alive, and like I said, you're not going to be using it for damage dealing. You'll be fine with just the one weapon set for that. So it's quite good because it means that it makes this a little bit more straightforward for newer players, because the Revenant can be a little bit more confusing. It's more difficult than some of the others because you've got this whole energy mechanic and switching between the stances and all of that, which I will go through in a lot more detail a bit later in the video. But for now, let's have a look at the dual swords then, and the weapon skills we've got for that. So with our swords, our number 1 skill is a chain skill, and this is quite an important one. Whenever your main damage skills are on cooldown, you're going to be whacking out this chain. You're going to let it play out. As always, try not to interrupt it, because quite a lot of the damage and effects are obviously weighted towards the third and final strike, so let it play out, and you're going to be using this a fair amount. So the first one is Preparation Thrust, which is stab your foe with your sword, inflicting vulnerability. You can see it's melee range, and it hits up to 3 targets, inflicts vulnerability. The second one, Brutal Blade, slice foes, damaging them and inflicting vulnerability, so same again. And then Rift Slash, which is slash foes, creating a rift on them that explodes for additional damage after a short delay. So the same as the other ones, but after a second it's going to explode and do more damage and hit up to 3 targets in a radius of 180. So like I said, you can be letting this play out whenever your other damage weapon skills are on cooldown, so you're going to be using this quite a lot. We'll be buffing this quite a lot with some of our utility skills, which I'll go into in a little bit. You can't really demonstrate a chain, but you can only really, without an enemy, you can only really demonstrate the first one. But as you can see, nice little animation there with the mists and stuff. I like the animations on the Revenant, actually. It's pretty cool. And so our number 2 skill on the main hand sword is Chilling Isolation. So this has a 5-second cooldown and costs 5 energy, which is your bar just along here. So strike all nearby foes, then release a burst of mist energy that deals a second strike. The second strike deals bonus damage if it hits only one enemy. So you're going to strike everyone around you, so a radius of 240, hit up to 5 targets. You're going to do a decent amount of damage, and then you're going to release a burst of energy. I mean, this is pretty good, because if it hits up only one enemy, it does extra damage, which means that, you know, if you're not surrounded by enemies, you know, it sort of makes up for the fact, because it's not just a simply AoE skill, which makes it good against single targets like a boss, or also good if you're fighting, you know, up to 5 enemies around you. It will spread the damage between them. So either situation, this is good. This is one of your main damage dealing abilities, so you can be whacking this out whenever you can, basically every 5 seconds pretty much if possible. Let's have a look at this. There you go, nice spin attack there, as you can see, and damages everyone around you. 5-second cooldown is pretty good, and 5 energy is quite a small cost as well. So this is one of your main weapon skills, so you'll be whacking that out pretty much on cooldown. Your third and final skill for the main hand sword is Unrelenting Assault. So this costs 15 energy, so it's a bit more expensive, and has a 12-second cooldown. So shadow step and unleash fierce attacks on nearby foes. Gain might each time you damage a foe. So you can do it from 450 range to sort of mid-range, and you basically, shadow step means you effectively teleport to your enemy. You're going to do a flurry of attacks there, and each time you damage a foe you'll gain might, and that increases your damage going forward. While you're shadow stepping, you'll have a second and a half of evade as well, which means you can't be hit, so it can be good for that. This isn't a skill you're going to be whacking out on cooldown, because it can be quite costly and it's not the highest damage skill. Could be used as a gap closer to bring you closer to an enemy if they're trying to get away. You could use it as an opener potentially to travel to your enemy, because you're going to be giving yourself some might to help with your other skills. So if you use this first, you basically means your other skills do a little bit more damage. So potentially you could use it as an opener or a gap closer, or just a way to move around. It's pretty good mobility as well, this weapon, which is good. So it helps you move around the battlefield. Like I said, you're not going to be whacking it out constantly as part of, like, if you're just trying to damage an enemy, because it's a waste of resources really. But you can use it sort of as a way of getting around, and evading some attacks as well can be useful for that. Your number 4 here, so this is the first of weapon on your offhand sword, is Shackling Wave. This costs 10 energy and has a 15-second cooldown. So slice through the air, sending a wave of energy from the mist towards your foe and dealing rapid strikes. Immobilized duration is increased per target you strike. So yeah, it's going to do an additional bit of damage, and it's going to send out some additional strikes to enemies. It's going to immobilize enemies, and so the more targets you strike, so up to 3 targets, you'll be increasing the immobilized duration on the enemy. So it's pretty good way of controlling the enemies, immobilizing them and stuff like that. Some extra vulnerability. It's not the biggest damage skill. Let's just demonstrate this. Boom, there you go. You can see it shoots that out there. It's a good skill. Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to want to use this relatively often. I'm going to go into your number 5 ability in a sec, but basically you want to prioritise your 2 and 5 abilities while you've got energy as your main damage dealing abilities. But your number 4 is good as well, and it also has the added effects of, you know, immobilising the target and adding some extra vulnerability and stuff like that. So it is a good skill to use as well, so you can stick that in there whenever you can. And as I was just saying, the number 5, which is the last ability on your offhand sword, this is called Death Strike. So this has got a 15-second cooldown and costs 10 energy. So shadow step to your foe and deliver a quick attack, then deliver a second devastating blow if it hits. So this is another one for moving around, but also it is really good for damage. So you are going to be on a whacking this out on cooldown, so every 15 seconds. It allows you to move around, so obviously use it on the target you want to move to, but you can use it if you're just attacking one target as well. You'll just shadow step to them even though you're already there. You'll gain Fury as well. As you see, this will help keep Fury on yourself, which is going to increase your damage and critical hit chance and stuff like that. and you can do it from 600 range, so you can use it to move around the battlefield as well. And obviously if the first one hits, then you'll deliver a second devastating blow, and that's where the damage is. So make sure you hit with the first strike so you can get that extra damage. So that's all of the skills for the 2 swords. So like I said, you're going to be wanting to use your 2 and 5 abilities as your main damage dealing abilities, and while they're on cooldown, you can let your chain play out here, as well as getting the odd number 4 in there as well if you need to immobilize your targets. And then your number 3 as well. Try not to waste too much of your energy with this one, but you can use it as a gap closer or an opener to give yourself some might as well. So that's a really good weapon overall. So that's where most of our damage is going to be. And like I said, you don't have to worry too much about you won't be swapping to your other weapon to do more damage while the skills are on cooldown. You'll just let your number 1 play out. So all of your damage pretty much is going to be on this weapon set. So let's have a look at the staff, which is your other weapon. Like I said, it's a bit different to other ones. This isn't like another one for doing damage. Like I said, if you do need a ranged weapon with a bit of damage as well, because some sort of content you're doing, the hammer is an option, but a hammer is definitely not an option to replace your twin swords, because the damage would be considerably less. So don't consider that. I like to have the staff here though. It's good for crowd control, it's good for healing yourself and allies. It's just useful to have there if you do run into any trouble. So let's have a look and go through these skills now. Okay, so your number 1 is a chain skill as well. You got rapid swipe, which is swipe your staff at your foe. So it's this is a melee ranged attack, and it's going to hit up to 3 targets. Second one is forceful bash, which is bash your foe with your staff. Once again, same as the last one. And then rejuvenating assault, which is cleave foes around you with your staff, creating healing orbs for you and your allies. This is actually a healing skill. This is why I said obviously this isn't going to be what you're using to do damage, because even your number 1 skill drops healing orbs on the floor, which is going to mean that you and your allies can pick them up and get a bit of healing on yourself. Your number 2 is Mender's Rebuke, which costs 5 energy and has a 5-second cooldown. Smash the ground in front of you to damage foes. After a delay, allies in the area are healed. Heals for more if an ally was struck. So once again, it's another healing one here. It does do some damage on put weakness on foes as well. But after a small delay, it's going to heal all allies in the area, and for even more if you struck an enemy. But like I said, this is just going to be as and when you and your allies need healing. You might pull these out, but it's not something you're going to be using most of the time when you're trying to kill enemies. So your number 3 skill here, this is pretty good. So Warding Rift. So this costs 10 energy and has a 12-second cooldown. So create a rift from the mist that blocks incoming attacks. When the rift closes, it blinds foes in front of you. So this is really good because you'll last for a couple of seconds, and you'll be able to block all attacks during that period, and then you'll blind the enemies afterwards as well. So it's a good defensive ability. I don't think I showed you the other abilities real quick. Obviously the first one I can't really show you. Your number 2, that's just what that looks like. A nice smash there, healing your enemies. And the number 3 we just went through, as you can see, really awesome there, spinning your staff around, creating a shield to block attacks. So that's one that you might use. So you might, if you're really in need of defense, swap to this weapon, use your number 3, and then your number 2 potentially can heal as well. Your number 4 is Renewing Wave. So this costs 15 energy and has a 15-second cooldown. So release a burst of mist energy that heals and removes conditions from allies. Create a healing orb for each ally that loses conditions. So once again, this is a good healing ability here, and for condition cleanse for you and your allies as well. So as you can see, burst of energy, you're going to heal you and allies as well as removing conditions from yourself and them. And for each condition that your allies lose, you're going to create a healing orb as well, just piles on top of that extra healing that you're doing. So your number 5 is Surge of the Mists, which costs 15 energy and has a 20-second cooldown. So charge forward, knocking back enemies that cross your path. So this is a really good crowd control one. It's a really good skill if you need to bring down an enemy's defiance bar. It can pretty much clear a defiance bar almost in one. So it's really good for that. You do evade for a second. It does a decent amount of damage, and you can have up to 8 impacts. It can be from mid-range as well, so let me just show you the skill. As you can see, you're dashing forward there, smashing enemies around. So this is one of the skills that you probably, if you move to your staff, you probably will whack this out. Bit of crowd control, like I said. If you're fighting a boss, you want to take down their defiance bar, it's a really good skill, so you might want to whack that one out. So yeah, don't sleep on that skill. It is actually quite good, to be fair. So that's everything for these 2 weapons. Just to clarify, for new players, you're going to want to be whacking out the sword when you first start. Oh my god, he's holding it like a 2-handed sword. That's a bit of a weird glitch there. But yeah, so you're going to be wanting to get a sword as soon as you spawn. I don't know what weapon you start with as a Revenant, I can't remember, but get a one-handed sword whenever you can. You can get it from the trading post for a few copper. You can get one from a weapon merchant, or just pick one up from an enemy. And so when you're level 1, you'll have your number 1 skill here. You'll unlock your number 2 skill when you get to level 2. Your number 3 skill here when you get to level 4. And then you're going to want to use your offhand sword, so basically just any other one-hand sword you can stick in your offhand slot, and you'll unlock your 4th skill here at level 6, and your 5th one here at level 8. And then by the time you get to level 10, that's when you'll then unlock weapon swap, so you can get your staff whenever you need. But like I said, start with these. There's no need to get the staff straight away. The early content shouldn't be so challenging that you'll need that staff anyway. So maybe you'll want to use a hammer for a bit of extra range damage at first. But by the time you level up a bit, you probably want to stick the staff here just for that added healing and stuff like that. So obviously it's a bit of a strange one overall, with this being your damage dealing rather than having 2 damage dealing weapons. But I think it probably makes it a bit similar for you. You're not going to be constantly weapon swapping. You just have to focus on moving between your stances and stuff like that, which we'll be going into very shortly. So that's everything for the weapons for the Revenant. So now we want to have a look at the healing, utility and elite skills. Alright, so the healing, utility and elite skills are actually quite different on the Revenant to every other class in Guild Wars 2. The reason for that is that you don't actually choose which skills you want. As you can see here, I've not actually got any other options. That's because they are preset depending on which stance you choose, and there are 4 stances to choose from. For this build, I mean, we've definitely got to go with the Legendary Assassin stance and the Legendary Dwarf stance. The Legendary Assassin stance is definitely the best DPS stance overall. So that's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. So that's why we definitely want that as part of this power build here. And the Legendary Dwarf stance is decent DPS and also defensive abilities as well. The Assassin stance, as well as DPS, does give you a decent amount of mobility as well, so do bear that in mind. But these are definitely the ones you want to go with. The Centaur stance is more for healing, and I think the Demon stance potentially more of a condition damage build, but definitely these are the 2 you want. I wouldn't consider any others for this build. And because of that, we've got 2 sets of healing, utility and elite skills to go through. So we'll do that now. I'm going to start with a Legendary Assassin stance. So our healing skill here is Enchanted Daggers. So the healing skill you'll have from level 1. So that's good. So depending on what stance you have, you'll have a healing skill from level 1. And this one costs 5 energy and has a 30-second cooldown. So summon Enchanted Daggers that will attack as you attack, siphoning life from targets hit. So this is a slow burn of a healing skill. You'll get a bit of an initial heal, and then you're going to have 6 daggers flying around you, and basically as they hit the enemy, or as you hit the enemy, they'll attack as you attack and give you some extra heals as well. It lasts for 15 seconds here, 15 seconds to use all 6 of those blades. Let me just show this to you now. So as you can see, the 6 blades around you here, and as I attack, it'll be attacking the enemy as well and giving me some extra healing. So if you don't need a big burst heal to start with, you can use this, and basically as you attack, your health will be going up, up and up. So that's a good option there. So obviously with any healing skill, whack it out as and when you need it. If your health's full, it's pointless, but obviously if you need to get it back, then you're going to want to use this 30-second cooldown, so just bear that in mind. Your first utility skill here on the Assassin stance is Riposting Shadows. So one thing I'd say about these utility skills, are that they don't actually have, generally don't, they either don't have cooldowns or they have really quick cooldowns. But that doesn't mean you want to be, bashing them out all the time, simply because you have got, they expend energy, and that's a finite resource. And you don't want to be utilizing all of your energy on this. You want to be using it on your damage skills over here. So your first one, as we say, riposte in shadows, so dodge backwards through the mists, remove movement impairing conditions, and gain fury. So this is only to be used as and when you need to get out of combat, basically. You're going to remove conditions from yourself, you're going to move back, give yourself some fury, and gain some endurance as well. So you evade and break stun. So if you're in a bit of a crap situation, maybe you've been stunned, you're getting hit from all sides, use this because you'll break the stun and move back out of it, and then when you've done that, perhaps switch to your staff and use some of your defensive abilities. So for example, you might want to do that, quickly swap to your staff, and then use some of your defensive abilities as well. So that could be potentially one way that you want to do that, and then that number 5 skill gets you back in, swap back to your swords, something like that. It's just a suggestion, but yeah, so don't be whacking that skill out willy-nilly. It's a big chunk of energy, 30 there, and it will be a right waste, so only use it when you really need it, but it is good for mobility and for keeping yourself alive if need be. Your second utility is Phase Traversal, which is got a 5-second cooldown and also costs 30 energy. So step through the mists to your target. Your next few attacks can't be blocked. So this is a gap closer, which gives you quickness, which is good. Skills and actions are faster, and also your next attacks are unblockable. Does a bit of damage, and it can be from long range, so 1200 range. I mean, yes, you could use it as an opener, but do I want to start down 30 energy because of this skill? Not really. I'd rather use one of these potential openers over here, like your number 3, which is 15 energy, so it's got half the cost. So I wouldn't say I'd really recommend using Phase Traversal too much. Try it out, see how you get on. But yeah, it's not one that I'd really recommend. But like I said, I would, if you could have a choice, potentially I'd swap that out for a different one, but you don't get that choice with the Revenant, so that's just sort of a spare one there that you probably won't use too often. So a third and final utility skill is Impossible Odds. So this is empower yourself with Shiro's incredible speed and destructive prowess, gaining great movement speed and striking foes an additional time when you hit them. Okay, so just to explain this ability, as you can see at the top, it costs 5 energy, but it has a -6 there. What that means is -6 of these little arrows here. So as you can see, you're currently +5, which is the maximum, which means if you expend energy as such, it will come back nice and quick. But -6 means that you'll lose all 5 of these up arrows, and you'll actually move to 1 down arrow, so your energy will slowly drain. So there's no time limit for keeping this going. But you will drain your energy while you're using it. This is a really important part of this build. So basically, whenever you go into combat and you start doing damage, you're going to want to activate this ability. Like I said, you get increased movement speed and stuff like that. But the main thing is you get an extra hit whenever you hit an enemy, so it's going to be doing a ton more damage. So you're going to activate that. You can see it's now draining my energy. Start using my other skills as well, which uses my energy, but you can let your number 1 play out, which doesn't cost any energy, and you can do that for a while with this drain going on. But as you can see, your number 9, you press that again, you'll come out of it, and then your energy will come back pretty quickly. And there's no cooldown there, so you could whack that out again pretty soon as well, and start using your abilities. So you're going to want to keep this up at all times while you're doing damage to the enemy. So do bear that in mind. As soon as you go into combat, activate that, use your other skills. I will be going into energy management a bit later when we go through the profession overview, like switching between your stances, using your F2 here and stuff like that. So don't worry too much. I'm just saying have this activated at all times where you're in the legendary assassin stance, because it will up your damage loads. And that's why we find playing out that number 1 chain skill quite a lot, because it's been going to be doing loads more damage simply because of that skill. So finally here we have the elite skill for the legendary assassin stance, and that's Jade Winds. This costs 50 energy and has a 5-second cooldown. So obviously this is very different to all the other classes. Normally you get a long cooldown on this. Here we only have 5 seconds. but it costs 50 energy, which is all of the energy that you have at base here. Which means it isn't a skill we're going to recommend that you whack out too often. But let's have a little look. So call upon the Jade Wind to turn nearby enemies into Jade, stunning them for a short duration. Really strong crowd control ability here. 3 seconds of stun for up to 5 targets in a radius of 600 around you. Let's just see that. So as you can see, really cool animation there, and they're all going to be stuck in Jade. So it's really good if you need to use that and potentially move to here to use some of your healing and defensive abilities. So it is a button that you would only use if you're really desperate. Like I said, you're going to be wasting all of your energy. So, you know, especially when this stance is where you want to be doing most of your damage. So I can't imagine you'd be whacking it out too often unless you get really desperate. Okay, so that is all the legendary assassin stance skills. So let's have a look at the legendary dwarf stance. As you can see, like the animations on the bar and stuff all change when you change stance, which is pretty cool. Just to clarify as well, I said that you have your healing skill from level 1. Your utility skills you unlock at level 11 for this one, level 15 for your second one, and level 19 for your third one. And the elite skill you won't actually have until level 31, so don't worry too much about that. If you're only just started, you'll get that at a higher level. So just have a little look now through these skills. So the healing skill we got here is a bit more of a chunk heal. So Soothing Stone, 30-second cooldown, costs 5 energy. So remove conditions and heal yourself, and also gain resolution. So quite good here. You get a big chunk heal. You remove conditions from yourself. You get resolution, which decreases incoming condition damage by 33%. So this is really something that you potentially want to use. Like I said, the legendary assassin stance healing skill is a slow one. If your health's getting quite low and you really need a chunk heal, move over to this stance, use this one, and you'll get a big heal there, as well as some condition cleanse and resolution. So your first utility skill here is Inspiring Reinforcement, which has got a 10-second cooldown and a cost of 30 energy. So create a stone road that damages and weakens foes as it's created. Once it's created, it will pulse, granting stability to allies. So it does a bit of damage. I'll show you what it does. It's quite easy just to show it. So you have to target it. Creates this stone road here. Everyone in this pretty big radius there is going to be weakened. You're going to gain stability for you and your allies. It's a cool skill. Looks pretty cool, but to be honest, it's got quite a high cost with 30 energy, so you're not going to be whacking this out very often. To be honest, it's not recommended to be part of your rotation or anything like that. You can use it from time to time if you feel like you need that stability for you and your allies, but to be fair, yeah, it's sort of a spare part as well. It's not one you'll be using too often. Your second utility skill is Forced Engagement, which has got a 15-second cooldown and costs 10 energy. So launch a chain at your target and at foes around your target. When the chain connects with a foe, it slows and taunts them. You take less damage from taunted foes. Though this is a good defensive ability, the energy cost isn't too much, only 10, so you will whack this out if you need to reduce the damage you're taking. So just to clarify, you're going to launch a chain. You can hit up to 5 targets. It can be done from long range, and it's going to taunt the enemies. And those enemies that are taunted, you know, you're going to take 33% less damage from them. So if you're the only player and you've got quite a few enemies there attacking you anyway, you can taunt them, which means that they'll attack you. But if they're attacking you anyway, it doesn't matter. But it will reduce all damage by 33% for a short period. So to be fair, that is definitely worth using if you really need that damage reduction on yourself, so do bear that one in mind. Not too much of an energy cost either. And your third utility skill here is Vengeful Hammers. So this is got a 5 energy cost, and the same as the number 9 skill in the other stance, it's got a -6 on your arrows here. So this is Invoke Hammers to circle around you, damaging foes. So it does a bit of damage and it does some healing as well. -20% incoming damage while you've got it active as well, and a radius of 180 around you. So while you're in Legendary Dwarf stance, like I said, most of your damage you'll do in Legendary Assassin stance, but when you go into Legendary Dwarf stance, which you'll need to swap between them to keep your energy up, you're going to want to activate this as well, which is cool. So keep this out, and as you can see, your energy will go down, but you can use this and you'll be doing more damage. As long as you're in melee range, which you should be when you got your swords out, you can attack them, and these hammers will be doing extra damage as well. So happy days for that. Okay, just click out of that now, and you can see your energy will come back pretty quickly. So like I said, we'll go through energy management in a bit, but this is a pretty useful skill to use. So your number 9 skills, basically, as long as you're in melee range, you're using your swords to attack. As you swap between your stances, you're going to want to activate your number 9 skills straight away whenever you go into them, because they're going to be adding to the damage you do quite considerably. So your final skill here, your elite skill here, is Rite of the Great Dwarf. So this costs 40 energy. So channel the power of the Rite of the Great Dwarf to turn yourself and nearby allies to stone to reduce incoming damage. So much like the elite skill on the other stance, this is only to be used as a major defensive ability. It's going to turn you and your allies to stone, which means gain 50% damage reduction. So that is a large damage reduction there on up to 5 targets in a radius of 600 around you, as well as breaking stun. Let's just watch this. As you can see, it takes about a second and a half to cast, and then you and your allies will be stone, greatly reducing the damage you take. So it is really one that you would use only if you were really desperate, because it does cost 40 energy, so it's quite costly. But if you really need defensive abilities, swap over to your stance here, dwarf stance, you use that, and then maybe swap over to your staff to use your defensive and healing abilities there as well as you've got this big chunk heal here, which has only got a low energy cost, so you could use both of them. So those are all of the healing, utility and elite skills for the Revenant. Just to clarify, you'll be spending most of your time in assassin stance doing damage, keeping your number 9 active. These two you won't use so much. Number 7 only if you need to escape combat. Number 8 you pretty much not at all. The healing is a slow heal, so bear that in mind. And Jade Winds is crowd control if you are absolutely desperate. And then you'll be using the dwarf stance, probably slightly less often, but you can need to switch between them to keep your energy up. So when you get into this, activate your vengeful hammers as well, which is going to drain your energy but do extra damage to enemies in melee range. Pretty much not going to use your number 7. Number 6 is a nice chunk heal and condition cleanse. Number 8 here is one that's good for damage reduction, so do that if you need it. It's not too costly. And then this is a really good defensive ability when you're desperate, high energy cost though, so bear that in mind. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the weapon and armor stats. Alright, so the weapon and armor stats for this Revenant leveling build, let's have a little look. So when you first start leveling, the armor and weapons you pick up, they won't have any stats on them. But after a few levels, you'll start to get one stat. When you get that one stat, make sure it is power. This build is based completely around power. As you can see, it's the first stat on all of my gear pretty much is power. And when you only have one stat, you want it to be power. It just means you're going to be doing more damage. So power increases your attack, especially at a low level where you shouldn't be dying too often. It should be relatively easy content. You want to do as much damage as possible, which means you'll kill the enemies quicker and you will be leveling quicker, which is the whole point of this build. When you start to get a second stat after a few more levels on your gear, you pretty much want to think about what you need. So basically, if you're struggling a bit, you're dying a bit quickly, maybe you want your third stat to be toughness, which increases your armor, or vitality, which increases your maximum health down here. Those are viable options if you need it, but hopefully at that stage, if you don't, you could potentially look at precision, which increases your critical hit chance, or ferocity, which increases your critical hit damage. So a mixture of those two generally is quite good as well for increasing the amount of damage you do. So it just depends whatever you need. And then when you get a bit higher level, you'll get to what you normally have, which is 3 stats on your gear. And what I've done for most of my gear is I've gone with Berserker stats, which you normally use for a power damage build like this, which is power as the biggest stat and then precision and ferocity as the lower ones. Obviously maximum power means I'll be doing as much damage as possible, but extra precision and ferocity, as you can see, increases my critical chance and critical damage, so that's going to be quite effective and just means you can be doing a lot more damage overall. Obviously you might need to mix in some other stats depending on what you struggle with, but what I've gone with on this build, power, precision, ferocity on all of my armor along here, all of my weapons as well, power, precision, ferocity. But then over here, I've actually switched it up and gone power, precision, toughness, with toughness as the biggest stat generally. The reason I've done that is because you're going to be spending pretty much all of your time in melee range using these swords, and I want to be a little bit harder to kill. You know, you've got heavy armor, but you need to back that up with a bit of extra toughness. So I've done that. Obviously, if I feel like I don't need it, and I'm doing content where I could rather just do a bit more damage, then of course I can swap this out for some extra ferocity as well. But you can see this is still giving me precision here, so it's still increasing my critical hit chance. And then what I've done with my rune, on the armor here, as you can see, superior rune of the scholar, this actually gives me a lot of ferocity but not precision, so I'm still sort of evening it out between precision and ferocity there anyway. The rune of the scholar is quite an expensive one, so potentially use superior rune of strength as a bit of a budget option on that one, which is, you know, almost as good. But this is pretty good here, giving me power, ferocity, and increasing strike damage by 5% while my health is above 90% as well. So that is a good set of runes there for your armor once you level up. In terms of the sigils on my weapons, gone with superior sigil of force and superior sigil of strength on my main weapons here. Those are sort of the best combo that you're going to get when it comes to a power build. It gives you 5% extra damage there, and then you gain might for 10 seconds upon critically hitting a foe. Bear in mind, we've got a pretty much 50% critical chance here, which means that every other strike will be a critical hit. So you're pretty much going to have might on you at all times and stacking that, which is great, which means you'll do even more damage. And then on my staff, I've gone with the sigil of cleansing and the sigil of energy. So cleansing removes 3 conditions when swapping to this weapon in combat, and energy means you gain 50% of your endurance when you swap to this weapon while in combat. So that just makes it even better as a thing, because you're only going to swap to it when you need that defensive help. So you'll probably have some conditions on you which you'll cleanse, and you may have already been rolling around, so you get some of that endurance back as well. So that's why I've put those on there. I'm not interested in putting damage sigils on this weapon because that's not what it's for. It'd be a waste of time. So those are the stats I'm going for. Like I said, as you're leveling up, power is going to be your go-to. That should always be your biggest stat, because if you just start piling it all into the defensive things, yeah, you'll stay alive longer, but it'll take you a lot longer to kill the enemies. The leveling will slow incredibly, so I'm not going to put that into a leveling build. Pretty much all leveling builds are going to be power builds. But like I said, I've got extra toughness here because I think it's necessary, staying alive, I think it's helpful. But for the most part, power, precision, ferocity is what you're going to want to be doing. As we can see, got pretty much 50% critical chance there, as well as 200% critical damage increase as well, which means you're going to be doing a ton more damage than you would otherwise be doing. So that is all the stats we're putting into our weapon and armor here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the traits and specializations for this leveling build. Alright, so now let's look at the traits and specializations for this build. So specializations basically choose which direction your character goes in. There's a bunch of traits to choose from, which we'll go through specifically. I've gone with Invocation, Devastation and Retribution. A base Revenant will have 5 different ones to choose from, and you'll be able to pick 3 of them. You don't unlock these till a bit further on in the leveling, so your first one you'll unlock at level 21, your second one isn't until level 45, and you won't unlock your third specialization until level 71. So it might not be something you need to worry about right now, but obviously it's useful to know what you're aiming towards, so I'm going to go through that now. So when you get to level 21, the first one I recommend, so basically this order that I've got it here is the order I would say to choose them in. So your first specialization, you want to start getting up Invocation. So the passive abilities on this are Invoker's Rage, which means you gain Fury when you invoke a legend. So that means when you're swapping between stances, that's another reason why we're going to be saying about swapping between stances when I talk about the profession mechanics, because that will be giving you Fury. You get all damage dealt is increased while you have Fury. So that obviously bumps that up even more. And then gain Fury when you disable a foe. So whenever you stun, daze, knock back, pull, knock down, any of these things on an enemy, you'll also gain Fury. So it's all about getting that as often as possible. With the optional ones here, I've gone with middle, bottom, bottom. And that gives us Rising Tide, which is while your health is above the threshold, strike damage dealt is increased by 7%. So that means an extra 7% damage when your health is above 90%. And obviously if you're keeping your health up, then that just means extra damage. So that's why I've gone with that for this build. Here we've got Incensed Response. So gain might when you grant yourself Fury. Obviously a lot of the stuff was about gaining Fury, so if you're sticking might on yourself at the same time, which means even more damage, yeah, it's just perfect for a build like this. You're going to be stacking that stuff all day long. And here you've got Rolling Mists. So critical hit chance has increased effectiveness when you're under the effects of Fury. Alright, so this is ridiculous. So Fury, you're obviously going to have quite a lot. And you've obviously got quite a high critical hit chance, and this is going to increase that effectiveness by 100% when you're under Fury. So you know you're going to be critical hitting pretty much all the time, which is going to increase your damage by so much. So I definitely would say go with these options. Really great options here. Invocation as your first specialization. But when you do get to level 45, it shouldn't take too long probably with this build, you want to go with Devastation. And the passives on Devastation are Exposed Defenses, which your first attack when entering combat applies vulnerability. This ability is refreshed when you use an elite skill. So as you can see, you've got that here. At all times when you're out of combat, your next attack will inflict vulnerability. So that's good there, which means the enemy takes more damage. Destructive Impulses, which all damage dealt is increased, and increased additionally if you have an offhand weapon equipped. Obviously we do have an offhand weapon equipped here. So it means we're going to get a damage increase of 5% and then an extra 2.5% there from the offhand. So that's a really good passive there. And here we've got Targeted Destruction. So deal increased strike damage to targets based on their vulnerability stacks. So bonus damage per stack of 0.5%. Obviously we've got quite a few things that have been putting vulnerability on enemy. So that just means that we're going to be doing even more damage to those people. So pretty much, as you can see, all of this is all about doing more and more damage, and it, you know, you'll see that at the end when we do a demonstration. The damage for this build is really good. In terms of the choices on the Devastation here, we've gone with middle, bottom, bottom, and that gives us Unsuspecting Strikes, which is deal increased strike damage to foes with health above the threshold. So extra 20% damage increase to enemies whose health is above 80%. So basically, initially, when you first start hitting an enemy, you can do a bunch more damage. Obviously, it's only while they've got their health above there. Next up, Thrill of Combat. So gain stacks of battle scars while in combat. So every 1 second while you're in combat, you'll be getting a stack of battle scars, which is your next attack steals health. So that'll be pretty much constant while you're in combat. So that'll be good as well. Stealing health from the enemy means you gain a bit and they lose some, so can't go wrong with that. And here we've got Dance of Death. So applying vulnerability to foes grants stacks of battle scars. The healing from battle scars is increased while you are below the health threshold. So obviously, as we said, a lot of the stuff we'll be putting on the enemies gives them vulnerability, and while we're doing that, we're also getting more battle scars, which we just looked at. And then while your health is below 50%, the amount you gain, health you gain from battle scars is doubled as well. So it just makes it even better. It's going to make you harder to kill, which is really awesome as well. So our third and final one here, Specialization. Like I said, you don't unlock it till level 71, but obviously, so you might not need it for a while, but obviously to keep this a complete guide, we obviously want to look at what you'll be looking at when you're getting to those late levels as well. So definitely Retribution here. And the passives on this are Enduring Recovery, which is gain increased endurance recovery. So 25% regeneration increase, and that means you can roll around more. Unwavering Avoidance, so gain Vigor when successfully evading an attack. So Vigor gives you extra endurance regeneration, so you can see the pattern forming here, allowing you to be more mobile, which links up well with your Legendary Assassin stance here as well. Determined Resolution, so strike damage taken is reduced by a percentage while you have resolution. So 10% reduction in damage taken, and resolution is something you should have on yourself a fair amount from the skills that we've got. And in terms of the choices for the retribution specialization, we've got middle, top, and that is close quarters. So reduce strike damage dealt to you from foes beyond the range threshold. So anyone beyond the range threshold of 360, which isn't too far away, you'll have 10% less damage. So any ranged enemies attacking you effectively, you'll be taking 10% less damage, so that's a good option there. Here you've got resolute evasion, which is gain resolution after you dodge. So once again, a lot of stuff about endurance. If you're dodging around, you'll be gaining resolution as well, which, as we know from here, that's going to give you even more less damage taken when you've got resolution. So they all sort of link together. And then finally here we've got vicious reprisal, which is while you have resolution, all damage dealt is increased, and you gain might when you strike foes. Resolution granted to you lasts longer. So a lot of great things here. So duration of resolution is 50% more. While you have resolution on you, which hopefully will have a high uptime, all damage dealt is increased by 10%. And while you're attacking people in that state, you'll also be putting might on yourself, which increases your damage even more. So all of the things we've been going through here, just bumping your damage up with some good defensive traits in there as well to help you stay alive. So this makes for a very well-rounded class, a very good build that you should be able to stay alive but still do a ton of damage. So I'm really happy with this trait and specialization setup. So the next thing we're going to have a look at are the profession mechanics for the Revenant. Alright, so now we're going to have a look at the profession mechanics for the Revenant. And the profession mechanics on this class are different from any of the others, so this is quite an important one to pay attention to. I'll just go through some of the basics of the profession mechanics, as well as saying, how we're going to utilize them for this build specifically. So we've obviously touched on it a little bit. We've got the stances you can swap between, which give us our different skills along here. So we'll be swapping between Dwarf and Assassin stance. You've got an energy bar here, which is obviously spent with a lot of our skills along here and along here. And we've gone through which one of those we should be using and not. We've obviously got the upkeep arrows here. As discussed, we'll be using our number 9 skills, which will get this down over time, so that's fair enough. And then here we've actually got an activate ability you can use called Ancient Echo, which has a 20-second cooldown. So refresh your bond with your channeled legend, gaining energy and legend specific effects. So you gain 25 energy, so it's one that we're definitely going to be utilising in this build. It doesn't have a cost, so that's good. And depending on the stance you're in, you've got a couple of different things. So if you do it in an assassin stance, your next attacks can't be blocked, so that's your next couple of attacks. If you use it in dwarf stance, you get right at the Great Dwarf, so 50% reduction damage for 3 seconds. So with regards to this, because the majority of our damage is going to be done in assassin stance, what I would say is, obviously as discussed, we're going to be going into assassin stance, using our swords here to do as much damage as possible, while we've got a number 9 here as well. So let's just demonstrate. So we've got a number 9 active. Now we're obviously draining our energy. We're going to be using our skills here, which utilize our energy as well, so it's going down even more. Once it gets below 25, use your Ancient Echo, and you're going to be back up to almost 50 there as well. It's got a 20-second cooldown, but allows us to use more of our skills while keeping this active, and it will last quite a while. And then obviously when we swap, we'll be able to use it shortly again. So when you come out of here, your energy will start to come back. So I'd probably recommend using Ancient Echo in this one, in the Legendary Assassin stance, simply because that's the one you want to keep your energy up, because obviously as soon as your energy runs out, you're going to want to swap to your Dwarf stance. Let me just quickly demonstrate what happens when you swap to a different one. Let me just utilise some of these skills. So we've got low energy. If I press F1 there to swap, there you go, bang, right up to 50 energy. So that's the main reason why we are going to want to be swapping between the stances rather than just staying in the higher DPS assassin stance. We're going to be swapping between them, activating our number 9 ability straight away, using our damage skills here that we've got, any other skills that we need to use as well. Like I said, if you need extra defense, you can use Ancient Echo in this one as well, so you've got extra defense. But like I said, it just means you'll be spending more time in Dwarf stance, when to be honest you want to be spending more time in the Assassin stance. So swap over, number 9 again, use your skills, utilise your energy, hopefully you know, utilize your number 1 chain as well. Like I said, don't sleep on that. And you can see it's just coming back now, and then bam, energy back up again. Utilize your skills. So that's what we're going to be using to do our damage. That's how we're going to utilize Ancient Echo. Obviously swapping between these is important. You know, there's many things. Yeah, like I said, you want to be using it just to regain your energy, which means you'll be able to use your weapon skills more and overall do a bit more damage. You make sure you always activate your number 9s when you're swapping between the two of them, as long as you're close and doing damage to them. Obviously you get different abilities here, so you might want to move for a different reason. Like if you need a chunk heal, you're going to want to be moving here. You might move here, use that bam to heal yourself, and if you're in real trouble, maybe you're right at the Great Dwarf to give you and your allies 50% reduced damage for a short period. Whack out your staff, use some defensive abilities. So it is a really cool build. It's very different to a lot of the stuff that we've gone through. Like I said, the mechanics take some getting used to, so by all means spend some time getting used to it. It's not like any of the other ones. Like I said, that energy is a finite resource. Other than the thief, every other class in this game is based off of cooldowns, which is just easier because you can use things on cooldown. So you can just see it, it's easier to keep track of. Whereas here, you need to manage your energy. You need to know what your skills do. You can't just button bash. You have to know the skills you want to use. You have to manage your energy. So it can be a little bit more complicated, but it is a very fun class to play, and it can be really rewarding and really powerful. So that's just all of the professional mechanics for this build. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick build summary for you guys, just a run through of everything we've been through. Alright, so now for a quick build summary for you guys. So as discussed, weapon wise, we've got the dual swords and the staff offhand. Dual swords by far the best for doing damage for the Revenant, so you want to be keeping that out at all times. You want to be doing damage. You know, if you're in trouble, swap to your staff. You've got some great defensive abilities here. Your number 3, really good for blocking attacks. Your number 5, great for crowd control, breaking up a defiance bar of a boss as well. Your 4 and 2, a couple of good healing skills there if you really need it. With these swords, your number 2, your number 5, your main damage dealing abilities. Number 3 can be an opener or a gap closer. You'll teleport to your target. Number 4, you can whack out every now and then to do some extra damage. Other than that, let your number 1 chain play out. Don't interrupt it. With regards to your stance, you've got Assassin Stance, Dwarf Stance. Keep your number 9 up at all times on both of them. It will drain your energy, but will allow you to do a ton more damage. When you're in Assassin Stance, when you get low on energies, when it gets below 25, use your F2, Ancient Echo, to get yourself back up for more energy and just increase the amount of time you can spend on that. And when you do run out of energy, swap over to Dwarf Stance, got all your energy back. Don't forget to activate your number 9, utilize your skills, don't use your number 7. Number 6 is a good chunk heal, number 8 is good for damage reduction. Your elite skills on both of them are defensive. It's very defensive on the Dwarf Stance, crowd control on the Assassin Stance. Only use them when they need them because they're very costly from an energy point of view, so do bear that in mind. Like I said, utility skills, you don't actually get to choose them, but that's basically how you want to utilize them. You know, this is a slow heal here on this one, and always keep your number 9 active. Number 7, only use it if you need to escape. It uses a lot of your energy, so don't whack that out as and when. Number 8, pretty much you're not going to use. Weapon and armor stats, like I said, I've got power, precision, ferocity on all of my weapons and armor here, and I've got power, precision with a bit of extra toughness on my jewels just to make myself a little bit tougher there as well. With the traits, we've got Invocation, Devastation, Retribution. Unlock them in that order. As you can see, these are the ones we've gone with: middle, bottom, bottom, middle, bottom, bottom, and middle, middle, top. So you're going to want to copy that if you want to do this build, but obviously if you find something that works a little bit better for you, then you can always change it. Obviously we went through the professional mechanics as well. We've got your energy bar here, you've got your upkeep here, your number 9 skills start to drain it, so we went through that as well as using your Ancient Echo. So that is pretty much all of the basics of this build. Obviously if you have any more questions on it, leave in the comments below. I'm going to leave you now with a combat demonstration, just showing you how, you know, to start utilizing this build, but obviously you've got to work through it yourself and see how you get on. But thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe to be kept up to date, and I will see you later.